Well, what was Curtis LeMay's opinion of war in general?
Sure. It was called the LeMay Doctrine, and long before there was a Schwarzkopf Doctrine or a Powell Doctrine, the LeMay Doctrine basically states that if a nation decides to go to war, if it has no other alternative, and there should be diplomatic efforts, of course, but if it doesn't work and a nation has to go to war, and in the case of the U.S. it has to be decided by Congress, then the nation should use every weapon in its arsenal to end the war as quickly as possible. That's key. But the other side to this is that LeMay said if the country is not willing to do that, then it shouldn't go to war in the first place. And imagine if we had used that philosophy after World War II, we would have either won wars or not gotten involved in them in the first place.
After the war, Curtis LeMay was considered a hero and became the head of the Strategic Air Command, which was the United States' system of nuclear weapons, made ready to strike Russia in case of a nuclear attack. What was his philosophy concerning nuclear preparedness in the Cold War?
LeMay had two great chapters in his life. He had the war in Europe and the war in the Pacific. Those two alone would have been enough to make him a hero of all time. He then goes on to have a third act, and the third act is the creation of the Strategic Air Command, SAC, this mighty wave of giant B-52 bombers that circled the Soviet Union 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When LeMay took SAC over in 1948, barely any of the planes could even get off the ground. And it was with LeMay's purpose and drive that he turned it around and made it the deadliest military organization ever created. Now, that kept the Soviets in check throughout the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. And I think one of the reasons was not just because of the nuclear capability, but because they knew LeMay was the man behind SAC, and they knew he wouldn't hesitate for one moment to use any of those weapons if he needed to. If I may just add one other point here, President Kennedy was uncomfortable with LeMay. The two men did not get along. You couldn't imagine two more different personalities. Yet it was Kennedy, with McNamara's approval, who nominated LeMay to the Joint Chiefs. So the question is, if he was uncomfortable with LeMay, why would he want him as the head of the Air Force? Well, I think the reason was, and a lot of people forget this now, in the early 60s, there was a real likelihood that there could be a nuclear exchange with the Soviet Union. And Kennedy wanted someone like LeMay by his side if, God forbid, we ever came close to that eventuality.
I'm going to play a portion from the Stanley Kubrick film Dr. Strangelove, where a cigar-chomping general who was a caricature of LeMay had, without authorization, fired nuclear missiles at Russia. Let's listen.
While we're chatting here so enjoyably, a decision is being made by the President and the Joint Chiefs in the war room at the Pentagon. And when they realize there is no possibility of recalling the wing, there will be only one course of action open: total commitment. Do you recall what Clemenceau once said about war? He said war was too important to be left to the generals. When he said that 50 years ago, he might have been right. But today, war is too important to be left to politicians.
Warren, who created the image of LeMay as a demented, out-of-control Cold War warrior?
LeMay's reputation as the crazy general actually comes from Kubrick's 1964 film, Dr. Strangelove. That is when the entire country had this image of him as this demented warrior. LeMay could not have been more different from that image, and it shows the power of Hollywood. And when someone, a director, gets it wrong, it doesn't matter. That's the image that people have. It also didn't help later when LeMay ran with George Wallace, and ironically, he wasn't a racist. Wallace was, LeMay wasn't. But LeMay had this reputation, and the reputation was furthered by the fact, and it was partially his fault, because he didn't care about his image. Nowadays, we have And even then, we had generals like MacArthur who were very concerned about their image, and Patton. LeMay not only didn't care about his image, he seemed to go out of his way to make people dislike him. So between that and Kubrick's film, we have this image of him today as the demented general. He couldn't have been further from that. He was sober, he was focused, he always respected laws, and he understood that he operated under the civilian authority. The one thing he believed was that you always negotiate from a position of strength, and it was his job to give the civilian authorities, his commander-in-chief, the president, the most powerful force he could put together, and that's all he did throughout his life.
Very briefly, can you talk about Curtis LeMay's quizzical vice presidential run with avowed racist George Wallace? Is this where he got his reputation as a racist, even though he had helped integrate the armed forces after Truman ordered the military to do so?
You know, Michael, I went through all of LeMay's papers, and they are extensive in the Library of Congress. His daughter let me go through all of his personal letters. There is not one comment in any of those papers or letters that is anti-black, anti-Jewish, anti-Catholic, anti-anything. Well, actually, I'll take that back. There were a lot of anti-liberal comments. He didn't like liberals because he thought they were just too pie-in-the-sky, unrealistic. He was a great realist. But he ran with Wallace, and it was a huge mistake. All of his friends said so, his family said so. But he ran with him because he was so angry at Lyndon Johnson for having lied to him about Vietnam. He was afraid that Hubert Humphrey would carry on Johnson's policies. And he thought that if he ran with Wallace, he could take some votes from Humphrey and give them to Nixon. It shows how naive he was politically, because the only person he wound up hurting was actually George Wallace. You will find that George Wallace's highest point in the polls came 10 minutes before Curtis LeMay was announced as his running mate, and it just went downhill from there because he was awful on the stump.
Warren Kozak, author of the book LeMay, thank you for being on the Savage Nation.
Michael, it was my honor, and if I just may add one thing, the book is, people can get it on Amazon, and please do.
This is the Savage Nation. Be here or be nowhere.
Savage. The Savage Nation.
It's got a lot of passion.
He's funny.
Really right on top of things.
Talk 910 KNEW.
And here's what's on michaelsavage.com. You don't know this, but America, I know you've been watching the Michael Jackson funeral or something, getting ready for it, or I don't know, but Obama, while you slept, agreed to cut 1/3 of America's nuclear weapons. Have a nice night. According to Bloomberg News, Barack Obama is the most fiscally irresponsible president in history. You wouldn't know that either. It seems that he solved the world's problems. Don't miss the article, British didn't consult the United States on Michael Savage exclusion. Believe me, this is a cover-up. You must investigate this for yourself. Why would they suddenly say that they didn't consult the United States if they did consult the United States? I don't understand this one. Well, I think I do. Also on michaelsavage.com, Biden says, well, we misread the economy. Yeah, okay. And by the way, you good liberals, one of the released Gitmo prisoners is now leading Taliban forces against the United States troops in Afghanistan. I guess that's what you wanted. I guess Mullah Zakir is your hero, not the U.S. Marines. Don't miss Ellis Washington's article, Dr. Michael Savage, Prometheus in England. That's a great article. And a billionaire backs out of a $25 million sweet deal with a very clever, weaselly way of doing it. You're going to enjoy reading that one. And your friends at Goldman Sachs are in line for record bonuses. That's right. $20 billion in compensation to the wonderful men who gave us the Wall Street collapse. And if you think we're in a collapse, there's a great article on michaelsavage.com saying New York's moneyed elite celebrate the 4th in yacht style. Very nice mega yachts in downtown Manhattan. Former Defense Secretary Robert McNamara is dead. good luck to him. I hope that he doesn't cross the river Styx for what he did to the American troops in Vietnam.